Up recording. I don't need any recording. Bang, here we are. Father Liam Kelleher, thank you so much for joining us. Now, this is just a chat. It's a discussion. It's for anyone who's interested in Irish athletics, Irish sport, and also this, a very interesting story, a bit of a history of Irish athletics, but a little bit of a history about Father Liam Kelleher. I'm going to ask you a quick question, Father. You mentioned in our, previous conversations that you've worked with upwards of 25 Irish athletes who went on to great success, traveled overseas on scholarships around the world, predominantly the United States, and you've worked with a number of Olympians as well. Can you tell me very briefly, what kind of experience was it for those Olympians, those scholarship athletes and the Olympians, and, was it a successful experience, and, was it necessary for them to go on scholarship back in the day?
I think it was, because there were very, very few opportunities here to get a free education. In fact, in Irish universities, there was virtually no sport. There was actually no support. And then if you had the chance to get a full education for 4 or 5 years, totally free in a different environment, that sounded very attractive to me.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So again, I'm kind of going to be a bit cheeky here and suggest that, it was a bit of a meal ticket in terms of experience, adventure, but also the education piece, which maybe 30 years ago, or even 30, 40, even 20 years ago, might have been a better education than you'd got in Ireland. Would I be right in saying that, or?
No, they have a better education in sport. Definitely not in education, because the Irish education system is top class, but for academic education. But as far as sporting prowess was concerned, we've only come around to that in a realistic way, I think, in the last 10, 15 years.
That's very interesting. So of the 25, let's say approximately 25 scholarship athletes who you guided through, very young age, right through the juvenile ranks into junior ranks, and they got to a stage of 17, 18 years of age, and thought, look, guys, here's a great opportunity. Were there big success stories? What kind of percentage of those people went on to great championship success, or what was your feeling about that?
Very, very few went on to any major championships. None of them made the Olympics. They got a great education. They did very, very well in the States. But hand on heart, I can't recollect a single person that improved their performances or their times in the States. I don't know what the reason was. Did I get everything out of them when they were here, or did they slacken off a bit? Or I think sometimes they were run, they competed too much in America. I think that was the big problem. 3 or 4 races in the weekend, if you get pay for somebody's education, well, then has to be a payback time.
Yeah, that seems to be the cliche, all right. I mean, it's almost a cliche at this stage that a lot of people are burnt out, they're pushed too hard, and they're run to the ground, exploited effectively, which is a real shame. But do you think it's different now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago in terms of
I think maybe it is. There's much better system here in Ireland at the moment through the various colleges that give people scholarships. But I honestly believe, and I'm going to be very, very controversial in this, that they have a better lifestyle, I think, in America, that a lot of the younger generation here have gone right over the top in relation to dedication, and only very, very few make it through the system. And here as well now, you have the professional sports that attract people. But I think the percentage involved in that is minuscule. It's so small that it sugars over the major problem that we have of a kind of a society that is, out of touch with many of the realities that I grew up with.
Are you talking about the values that you would?
Exactly, the values, the respect for people, not just for the church or anything like that, respect for authority, all that kind of thing. And I've traveled America extensively, and if I wanted to bring up a child in a Ireland, I found it I find it very, very hard seeing the opportunities they have or they haven't got here. And I think with my experiences in America, by and large, I would prefer America, which
You
is a
definitely
complete
find it
turnaround.
hard.
It's a complete turnaround.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. And that's kind of sad, to see, the values of the younger generation change and the culture shifting. And I hope it isn't kind of universal, across the whole country. And maybe it's just,
It is right
periodic.
across. And yeah, and COVID didn't help, and I would have a
Yeah,
great experience of that, because as well as this track and field and athletics, I would be a huge believer in any type of sport, team sports, particularly Gaelic football and camogie for girls, which I got involved in when I was in Dromina, because and in schools, because they wanted the team games and I wouldn't let them down. And during the COVID, a lot of the good players and good teams I had under 14, when I asked them to come training, when the opportunity arose, they just walked away. At 16, that's the critical age here, 15, 16. The vast majority of them walk away from sport, and that's the big issue facing Ireland today in sport.
why do they walk away, do you think?
I don't know. It's the whole culture of society, I suppose. Fact, a lot would be what they pick up on social media. They pick up on television programs. They pick up from their friends, and you need to be very, very dedicated to stay, particularly at an individual sport. Maybe not so much at team games, but they're suffering as well, very, very much.
There's a lot of distractions
Yeah.
today. Yeah, that's interesting. But what kind of impact do you think COVID has had? And do you think people can, what can people do to bridge the gap or to catch up, recover, in 2022, end of 2021?
There's a lot of catching up to do. I think when we get back to a new normal, we should evaluate the whole situation, particularly in primary schools, that I suppose we've done the lowest rates of physical education in primary schools in Ireland than in any country in Europe. And it's been commented on, but certainly there's so many rules and regulations now as well, and that's hindering. Like before, when I was involved in schools, you go in and be delighted to take the kids training. There's so much red tape now and forms to fill and all that. It puts off volunteers doing these things, but they shouldn't put off the teachers. The kids are part of the educational system, and they should be given an overall education, not, I suppose, one or two subjects. Sport should be, I think, I hate to say it and be misquoted, but I think sport is equally important, or in fact more important than any other parts of their education.
Look, I think, that would be universally agreed, Liam. I think most people in the right mind would see physical education as integral to general education. In fact, it was a topic that came up when we spoke to Javier Sotomayor a couple of months ago about high jump and the system in Cuba. And somebody asked, how important the physical education curriculum was in the school system. And, he obviously found it essential. But do you think that's been harmed detrimentally because of COVID, or maybe the modern culture? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I give you a typical example of that. I visited a couple of the primary schools that I had been visiting since I retired. Obviously, and with COVID, we are not allowed into schools, that much. But I'd go and meet the teachers and, be socially distancing myself. And you'd be passing maybe through the playground, and the kids would be all, saying, hi, when are you coming back? Because I did that almost full time with cooperation of the schools and the teachers. And then when I meet them out in the street, anywhere, they're full of energy and they're full of support and full of goodness. And all that, I feel, has been decimated now. In the coming generations, if I can get back into schools again, even at my age, I still have I suppose, a contribution to make because of my experiences and because of my commitment to fulfilling a need that I see in sport and in, I suppose, PE.
Of course. And you have these, ridiculous situations like you mentioned to me the other day about being hunted out of a field or a patch of grass by some disgruntled local who didn't want you using a patch
Yeah,
of
it was only
turf.
just a local wood in the estate, but there had been a lot of problems. And when the first lockdown was over last June, I invited all the younger kids, you were allowed 15, and they came and they ran through the wood and they just passed, I suppose, 20 yards away from a certain house. And she reported me to the guards, and at least the summer got out of it and we moved somewhere else. And ironically, the wood was actually given to the community by an order of nuns who sold the land for building houses that they're living in, and conditioned that the wood be left for their recreation. But that's the situation you find yourself in today. So many, I suppose, angry people, they have nothing better to do, and they're probably not happy themselves, and they don't want to see other people
that's
happy.
It. But what I found about COVID, Liam, is that COVID has really brought out the weird people in society. It's really, it's kind of exposed them, and it's brought people who are on the fence of being weird, pushed them well and truly into the weird camp. So suddenly the population of weird people is, and they actually celebrate being weird, because the idea of social distancing, as important as it is to protect us from the contagion of the virus, it's a grossly unnatural position to take in a social community, right?
Absolutely.
And now it's become such a normal part of the vernacular that we should keep away from each other. There's weird people, in my view.
Yeah, and that's the whole point.
Way to go.
I'm very strong on that particular point, because we've only one place here, the community college. The gates were opened, they could go in around the field, and there was huge spaces. All the other grounds, the GA grounds, the rugby, they were all locked up. Nobody could go in. Yeah. And this is a place in the community field where they can walk around. I tell you the stories some of the time to be seen, I'd say, in the not too distant future, of a couple of the younger ones that wanted to train, and I went up for a walk there, and I gave them their program, and they walked from 10 minutes up to an hour, and the improvement they made on the same distance, a time trial, after getting up to an hour non-stop running, was amazing. And that proves to me that we need to do things like that. And I couldn't see any problem with that during the lockdown, even though the distancing, you had rugby matches going on, you had soccer matches going on, you had all these sports going on in empty stadiums, and no kids couldn't even go out and train or even run.
I mean, it was a lot of ridiculous things that happened. I mean, it went to such extremes that it became, the secondary effects, the reaction to it became probably as harmful as the bloody virus. I mean, you can run 2-3 meters, apart in a group of 5 or 6, and in theory, you're outdoors, you're socially distant. You're out in the bloody fresh air, a couple of meters apart. Provided you're not coughing and spluttering in each other's faces, or up close and personal. I don't see the problem in it.
Yeah, and one good mutual friend. Mutual friend of the two of us, Robert Heffernan. He spoke up on radio and television and programs and everything. And
was he?
You just didn't. The authorities didn't listen. They've blinkered minds. They've this idea, and then nothing. You can't go one way. You can't go the other way. It's like that, blinkered.
Fear is a currency, and it's a very valuable currency. And if you make a stand against fear, then the fear mongers get very, very upset, because people trade on fear, and fear is a tremendous power. Yeah. And again, it's not a dichotomy. Very important to say this. Not a dichotomy of let's be reckless and fearless, or let's fear. There's a whole spectrum of behavior in between.
Exactly.
So Rob, in fairness to Rob Heffernan, I've read some of his views, and I fully support him that this business of taking it from one extreme to the other, and basically, there's people who actually, I feel, revel in lockdown type scenarios. There's people who naturally don't like people. It's not natural, but who generally just don't like people. There's lots of people who don't like people. I meet them all the time. There's people who unashamedly don't like people, and they're the guys who love it.
Anyway, and to get away, get away from COVID because I kept away
Yeah,
from
that's true.
news, is to get back to the thing about the scholarships. You asked me earlier, what was my take on it? Now,
Yeah,
when I went to Tullylease from Middleton, when I built this famous track, and
yeah,
I looked at the situation, Liam O'Brien had just graduated from Thomond College in Limerick, and he'd gone on the Irish team. There was one guy gone on scholarship, Joe Bryce. I had nothing to do with him in a sense, with the school in Dungarvan. He was a big, strong guy. And I told him he could be shot at a discus thrower, and he won national championships. And the first guy that went to scholarship, I think 52 years ago, during my time in Middleton, but nobody else. And Liam O'Brien was kind of asked, and I was asked, and I said no. And I was asked why. I said because he's a home bird, he's a shy young man, and there's a PE college opened in Limerick, and I think it'd be very, very good if he went to that PE college. And then when he graduated, he'd be able to pass on his knowledge and his expertise to the kids in school. That's exactly what he did. He came out of that college, spent a year in Bantry, and then went to Middleton. And even though he's retired now, about 7 or 8 years, it's amazing, he still goes back to the school regularly to coach the athletes. Now, he didn't go to America, and yet he won 11 national senior steeplechases, and he went to the Olympics in Los Angeles and got to the semi-final of the steeplechase. So,
and,
you know,
and Robert Heffernan didn't go to America, and Derval O'Rourke didn't go to America, and 2 other Cork people.
Yeah, but against that, a lot of people that did go succeeded. Ronnie Delaney, Sonia O'Sullivan, Frank O'Mara, Paul Donovan. We think them, Niall Bruton, we think them, especially this week with the loss of John McDonald, the best coach ever in American track and field history. And he happened to be Irish from Mayo, won 40 NCAA or colleges titles between cross country, track and indoor. So, you know, that people like that, there's a pile of success stories, but it just happened that I might have been one of the unlucky ones in all the people I said. No, they all turned out, apart from 1 or 2 exceptions, they all turned out wonderful people. Most of them came home. Some are still in America and settled down with families. And I try to visit them or keep in contact with them as often as possible.
Have you any fond memories of John McDonald, Liam?
Oh yeah, I did a feature on Marathon magazine, and the one fond memory I have is meeting him in Arkansas with Frank O'Mara and Paul Donovan. I met his wife and his 2 children, and I actually posted a photograph of that. They're big grown up. This was 1986. This was a way back. You know, I was at the American Championships, I think, in Indianapolis to watch another athlete competing. He actually got to the final of the steeplechase. He was, I suppose, a good success, Kieran Stack, but he never won the senior title here. I think only once, because Liam O'Brien was on top of it the whole time. But anyway, Kieran got to the American final, and Derek O'Connor was there as well. And he was the only white man in the 400-meter final, you know. And those 2 guys, you know, did well. And there are other people as well. Some of the other athletes came back and won the national titles, like Anita Philpott, Garrett Barry. You know, it wasn't a kind of a failure in a sense, but you don't equate everything to making the Olympic team. But you can see from your experience, have they progressed? Certainly they have as individuals, but maybe not to the level that I thought that America would do for them, that they'll all be going to the Olympics.
I mean, we could talk about that for a long time, you know, what the ingredients of success are at a high performance level.
Absolutely, that's a totally different issue. And the other issue was that recognizing that there was very little support from here. When I went to Tullylease, I suppose I thought this brilliant idea would be if we could raise money to keep Irish athletes here at home and pay for their education in university, and then to get the thing going. I came up with a crazy idea. It's not so crazy now, but a lot of the ideas I came up with those times were crazy, to organise a raffle for £100, not €100, £100 a ticket. And I got a house at cost for the same company. Actually built a house for nothing in Tullylease, but the house got burned. And the first prize was a house, second prize was a mobile home, and the third prize was a car. And I think it was 500 tickets, limited to 500, and I only got half it. And I think I only barely made the price of the draw, so that fizzled out. But at least I tried, you know. And an athlete won the house. A classmate of mine won the mobile home. I visited him every year when I was in the States. He was ministering in New Jersey, and he died a few years ago. But he won the mobile home. He was from Mount Shannon. He set it up by the lake, and he came over every summer to live in the mobile home. I don't know who in the car, but at least somebody got some good out of it.
So you were ahead of your time there, 1978, trying to establish a sports scholarship in Ireland with Liam O'Brien in mind in particular. I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
An Olympian who you helped shape in his early days. And look, you've had an amazing legacy. I mean, I have memories that go back 30 years of, you know, you at Marathon Magazine taking photographs at, you know, BLOE, you know, counties, interprovincial championships, Irish schools, Irish content games, everything. You were there. You were a part of the furniture. You were always there in the background. And, you know,
I've totally volunteered.
I've very fond memories of those days, because it's like a photograph, you know, and you were there in the background. There was a few usual suspects who helped keep it together, helped the wheels turn. I mean, in schools, for example, John Shields would be one of those guys, you know, who just, without them, you know, the wheels just wouldn't turn, you know. But thank you for that. I really should say that. And I'm sure I'm speaking for hundreds of thousands of young people whose characters were shaped by sport. Wonderful, wonderful contribution. It was remarkable.
Absolutely. And it was a labor of love. A labor of love. And I loved it, you know. But again, it's more difficult that time. You had no digital cameras. You just took one picture if that wasn't right, you know, and you had to get them all developed and do the magazine. But, you know, that was part of education as well. And it stood me in good stead myself.
In the magazine, and we can thank the Frank Greeley's of the world as well for this.
Yeah.
The magazine was a tremendous what was it, backdrop to our sporting youth, because, you know, it was like hundreds and hundreds of pictures of kids in the magazine. If your picture was published in the Marathon Magazine when you were 10 years of age, oh my God, you might as well have won the Olympics. It was the most exciting thing in the world. I mean, I actually blame you for having an ego by the time I reached 13, because, you know, I was pictured with Ronald McDonald at the, you know, various events when McDonald's sponsored Irish athletics. And, oh my God, it was tremendous. But yeah, you were a pioneer in that regard, and photography was just one of your many talents.
It's history now, but I'm still publishing, I'm still taking pictures, and I'm still coaching.
But 1978, you tried to establish a scholarship system ahead of your time. Like I said, about 20 years later, actually 15 years later, Noel Carroll, Dr. Tony O'Neill in UCD set up the UCD scholarship program, which was closely followed by University of Limerick, DCU, maybe Galway, UCC now, and there's a whole host of colleges offering home, you know, the home option for talented athletes. What's your view on that?
I think it's absolutely fantastic, because they brought in good coaches, and the fact that I give great credit as well to Liam Kelleher for his Dublin track club. And I think there's something, rumours about something like that happening in Cork, that even if you're not belong to the club and belong to another club, people are welcome. You know, that you need people like that, mavericks, I call them, you know, that will rise above the parapet and take on something and see it through. And that's, I suppose, that's why I know they didn't do well at the European indoors, but the standard has crept up and up and up and up. Maybe the COVID helped in that sense, because people were able to get their mileage in. And I'm a firm believer in any sport. And I remember getting back to John McDonnell, I met Mike Connolly over there, you know, the triple jumper, Olympic champion, world champion. And he hated running, but he had to run 6 miles at least once a week, something like that, something, you know, that cringe, 100 meter or a 200 meter runner would cringe at today. And I think that's the whole secret. You must build up. And one very interesting thing, and this is vital in relation to advice, you should be always prepared to listen to advice. And in 1977, I took 40 athletes from Middleton over to a match in Scotland. and you're Raylene Boyle from Australia, Olympic champion, and Beth Neal, who got a medal in 400 as well, and they were competing, Eamon Coughlin, and Brendan Foster's coach was there, and I picked his brain, Stan Long. I said to Stan, I have a young man here, we'll have a chat with him. He's just got his Irish singlet, and he gave me actually the singlet going back on the train from Dublin when we were coming home, Liam O'Brien. I said, I think he's very talented. And I said, what will I do with him? He said, stop competing for maybe 6 to 12 months, build your mileage to 120 miles a week if he's a steeplechaser, build up to that, and then cut it down when he's competing to 70, and then take a month off every year, and you won't go too far wrong. And that's exactly what he did. And nobody knows this, well, very, very few people in athletics know that Stan Long gave a program to Michael Dickinson, a famous trainer at the time of horse racing, and he got the first 5 places in the Gold Cup before he went to America. And that's the kind of training that he got advised by Stan Long, Brendan Foster's coach, and Brendan was third I was there in the 5,000 in Montreal. So I think that's a nice snippet that we need, and that's why I always look to other people for help and studied that. And I think that's very, very important, to listen to others who have the experience.
Absolutely. This theme of being a student of your sport is so important.
Exactly. And you were a high jumper. I know nothing about high jump, and yet had several Irish underage champions at high jump. What did I do? I brought him over to London one Easter to Ron Murray, who was one of the top high jump coaches at the time. And they trained under him as well as other coaches. And I brought Ron Murray to Ireland. I remember in Middleton, I remember Lucy Moore, who was a high jumper herself and a good high jump coach, coming down to Middleton to be part of that coaching course that I brought Ron Murray to Ireland for.
All right. Fascinating. Well, the famous financial investor Warren Buffett said, if you don't know jewelry, know a jeweler. And you can understand the metaphor there being the real challenge as a student of your sport. And I've heard the best of the best still do this. They have this attitude that I'm always learning. I'm always hungry for more information. You have to keep asking questions. You have to keep looking inward and thinking, how can I improve myself? And I mentioned this before. I think Derval O'Rourke was a fantastic example of an athlete who didn't blame. She didn't blame. What she did was she held herself accountable, and she held her coaches accountable, and she put them under pressure. Jack Charlton used to say, whoever coached her, she said, look, I'm not going to tolerate mediocrity. And she told me the story once, after she became world champion. And I said, Derval, I remember you, a few years ago, and you were, relatively mediocre. You were making championship, but you weren't getting out of the first round. And that's what she said. She said, I gave them an ultimatum, and I said, things change or I'm out. And what I loved about that story, and I'll shut up in a minute, is I love the fact that she didn't tolerate being a journeyman, a journeyman, journey woman, whatever. I was a journeyman for a long time, and probably caught up in the excitement and thrill of championships and travel and scholarships and all that crap. But really, nobody really remembers that. And as Stefan Holmes said on one of our Zoom talks on that high jump hub, nobody remembers what you do at 17, 18, 19, no. As a junior. Yeah. What they remember is what you do in terms of breaking new ground and, championships, Olympics, whatever. Not necessarily Olympics now. Derek O'Connor was a great athlete, he never competed in Olympics, but the point is, being a pioneer of your event and raising the standard. And Derval did that. And I heard her story, even people like that, our high jumper, Deirdre Ryan, incredible.
Yep. I'm smiling about Derval because at the particular time, I coached an athlete who was very, very talented as well. And she was up with Derval, Lorraine Carr, but she never progressed. But, it's very, very important. And that's why I feel that little bit disappointed that very few of the American scholarship people that I coached made the Olympics, or none of them actually.
Steve Fleming, a well-known long jumper from another guy from Cork, successful businessman now in his own right. He made a great comment to me once, which was he encourages athletes to have goals, to have long-term goals, right? Not just short-term, short, medium, long, but have a long-term goal, but also have an exit strategy. And when I heard that first, I thought, what's an exit strategy? I mean, it sounds a bit negative, but he talked about it and it made a lot of sense to me on reflection. I mean, immediately it didn't, because I was thinking, why would you want to consider your exit? But it's so valuable to think in terms of the long term being not your sporting career, but rather your life,
And that's exactly where my big failing was, that when I was moved from my parish, the year I left, I think Middleton in 1977, I think we had 6 national senior champions, in various events. And after that, the vast majority have never competed again. And that's why at the time I thought of Liam O'Brien. He was the only link that kept the people that were interested going, I think, and he's still doing it. And he's still involved at administration in the Cork City Sports. And if I did nothing else, if I could get another 10 people like him in every place that I'd left, well then, there'd be a far different situation there. But it didn't happen, and regrets, it didn't happen. And we are what we are, and it is what it is.
But it's a jigsaw, isn't it, Liam?
Yeah.
It's a jigsaw puzzle. Like, you played your part. You've had a tremendous legacy, and it continues. And it's a really, really important part of the jigsaw. But then there's guys, the John Shields of the world who work in the school sport. There's guys who work in community games. There's guys who work in administration, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the high performance piece, which I'm particularly interested in. But just a moment, indulge this thought about John McDonnell, because obviously it's a very big week with him passing, and there's a lot of people celebrating his life. And I was fortunate enough to meet him on occasion, and he was a wonderful man, and you'd have memories of him. And you mentioned Liam Kelleher. What I find very interesting now with the Dublin Track Club is Liam is creating an environment. He's creating a culture, and John McDonnell did that in Arkansas. What's your view on that? What kind of, because we touched on this, the difference between success and failure and your scholarships, whatever. A lot of guys go to environments where the culture really isn't athlete centered. It's outcome centered, and competition centered, sponsor centered, maybe academic centered, whatever, but it's not athlete centered, right? Whereas John McDonnell, according to Alistair Cragg and all these guys, was a father figure. I mean, he was a mentor in the school center. What's your view on culture and environment, like building an environment?
Talking about John McDonnell, I know exactly. He developed the individual as much as the athlete, and that's why they loved him. And there's a small little clip that I was on Irish Athletics website on him. It said it all. So I leave that aspect because it's well known. Now, the Liam Kelleher thing, that could be a kind of a time bomb in a sense, because you get the people saying, oh, another fellow going off in a new tangent and doing something. I know Liam, he's often stayed in my house, and he has the sport deeply at heart. And maybe he's not getting enough support, and maybe it could backfire in the sense that clubs would say, oh, this is, he's destroying our athlete or clubs or whatever. No, I think it's a very, very good idea what he's doing. And I think it needs to be supported for the right reasons, not because of some people's bitchiness and saying, look, this shouldn't be done, or should mind his own athletes and mind his own business. I think he's doing it for the good of the sport, and he's in the right place to do it as well. He is there in the environment, around the universities, around the people, and, he's guiding them through. And to me, that's success. And, it will continue or it will fail, depending on the support it gets from the authorities like Athletics Ireland. I don't know what their take on it is, because I have no input in there no anymore. I did for years. So I'm all for what he's doing, and yet I worry about what he's doing, because we're living in an environment where there's all sorts of people that want to see you fail because they're not succeeding themselves.
And that's very sad, and it's shocking to me.
Well, if it happens, it shouldn't happen yet, hopefully.
Yeah, can I just unpack that a little bit? Is the structure of the Dublin Track Club, and excuse my ignorance here, is it one where people can compete for their own club and also compete for the Dublin Track Club? Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. But my understanding is they're still members of their own club, but it's the groups of them together that coach and try to reach a higher level. You'd want to talk to, I think the best way of answering all that would be to do a podcast with Phelim himself. I think you should do that.
Yeah, I might do that because I'm fascinated by the culture. I mean, like, you know, culture is a complex thing, and it's not something one individual can create. I mean, one individual will help, but really you need a team. And I think one of the greatest lessons I learned in athletics as a high jumper was, and it took me about 30 years to learn this genuinely, was that it's not an individual sport. I mean, it presents itself as an individual sport, but it's a myth. It's the myth of individualism. It's BS, because without the Liam Kellehers of the world, and I'm not trying to massage your ego here, what I'm saying is without the volunteers, without the administrators, without the coaches in particular, the people who rock up in thundering rain and wind and early Sunday mornings, etc., day in, day out, that's the bedrock of the sport. So this business of kind of single-minded individualism, and even this business of, because we've got this high jump hub now with Olivia Scully, and we're trying to create this kind of a virtual hub for jumpers, right?
Yeah, environment.
Yeah, it's a virtual environment, but I'm living in Sydney, so it's the least I can do, and at the most I can do from this distance. But the point I'm trying to make is we're creating this bit of an ecosystem where people can share ideas, learn. We've had a half a dozen really good speakers contribute a couple of hours a piece to these Zoom type talks, and I'm talking the best coaches in the world, some of the best athletes in the world.
Sotomayor and all those.
The point being that we've had Holm, we've had Sotomayor, we've had Alex Stewart, Mike Holmes, Deirdre Ryan. We've had some great people sharing some amazing insights into the world of high performance high jump training. And it's been a breath of fresh air, because we got a lot of guys who are suffering lockdown, can't even visit a gym or a track, and they're thinking, what the hell am I doing? I mean, what am I trying to achieve here, and how can I achieve it? And for me, joining the dots, being resourceful, tapping into the knowledge of people who've walked the walk before, it's critical, right? And the Phelim Kellys of the world, I think that's that kind of
initiative. You need more of them.
You need more of them, but I mean, I don't want to be all negative, but I can't see the controversy. I mean, okay, people begrudge other people, but I don't understand. I don't understand any negativity towards something like that. I mean, Noel Carroll was kind of working outside the system, building a scholarship in UCD, and he didn't really engage much with the AEI. No disrespect to the AEI, but he just felt, look, they'll do their thing and we'll do our thing. And his experience wasn't probably altogether positive. So he decided, I'm going to do it independently. And he did. And there might have been a bit of kind of questions about how it was done and whatever. And it definitely wasn't perfect. And Phelim's thing probably isn't perfect as well. But look, it's the piece of the jigsaw is high performance culture.
Absolutely.
And he's ticking the box.
It's far more difficult to do it now. I've experienced more negativity in the past 10 years than I experienced in 40 years before that. In fact, the past 5 years is quadrupled, because everybody's trying to get you down and everybody's trying to pick holes in what you're doing. And you need
maybe you're becoming more sensitive, Liam. Maybe you're just paying attention.
Not really, no. I think it's society. I wouldn't be that sensitive, but I'd have a level head. I think in all the situations, and everything I did down through the years was measured in the context I was in. But in the context you're in now, where there's so many people, even for the kids, vying for their attention, you go up to the field there, say in the community college I was mentioning, one day, and this is just after a couple of weeks ago when the lockdown was over, there was about 50 kids barely out in nappies, on the soccer all weather, and they about 20 coaches, and they show him how to kick a ball, and then out in the other field there was another group and another group and another group and another group. So you're vying with all these now, and then I suppose I might be speaking out of turn, but I think track and field are only getting the leftovers, apart from not few that grow up with it, their family. And the other thing is, it can be done. Look at Brie Denny's daughter. She is going to the American trials next week. I think she's 16 now. She's run almost just barely over 2 minutes for 800 meters. It's those likes of those people that will that were successful themselves, and a lot of them do put the work in. You know, like Robert Jeffrey now and all these people, they have a lot to contribute to the sport as well, and their experience would be fantastic because of what they've done.
Oh yeah, look, I mean, you've obviously got a ton of experience, Liam, and you see the full picture and you can compare, but there's a lot of positive stories out there. There's a lot of overcoming of adversity. There's a lot of great, I mean, women's middle distance running in Ireland right now. The story of the sprints, you know, the Paddy Fays of the world who helped, you know, and then the Harrisons down in Limerick helped these sprinters break new ground where for generations we didn't have sprinters. And the throwers, I mean, you know, so,
and the work that Johnny Welch does in Cork with Lee Bell and Lizzie Lee and all those other athletes as well. I think that shouldn't be forgotten. That there's still people out there giving their time and energy in a voluntary capacity, trying to promote Irish sport.
Absolutely, a lot of positive stories, and you know, to hell with the begrudgers. It's easy for me to say down in Australia, but one of the things, you know, just to move on to high performance just for a little bit, one of the things I was trying to get at with these Zoom talks with the cream of the crop of coaches and competitors was just to cut straight to the chase about, you know, what are the key factors? Tell us the hard truths about what's involved. And I know from experience that they are hard truths. I mean, it's no picnic being an elite athlete, particularly these days when the standards are so darn high. It's not only cutthroat at a championship level, but trying to get support when you've got a carding system which acts as a reward system rather than a support system. You know, they say that, you know, you have to become world class before you get funded. It's a bit ridiculous. So that stage, which I'm really interested in, the transition from junior to senior, it's a recurring theme of these talks we're doing with the high jump guys. And I'm interested in your view on that transition. I mean, we talked about it briefly with the scholarship guys, and you didn't really have many answers for me. You just kind of scratched your head about, you know, why a lot of them didn't really progress. And when they went to America, maybe they were burnt out, whatever. But, you know, even at home, it's still a lot of people who decide to hang around at home, like some of our distance runners are choosing to remain at home. What do you think is a single, apart from being a student of your sport, what do you think are the key factors that allow a good junior to become a good senior?
A lot, but I think they're starting miles too young. And I was the biggest fault finder in that, because I had hundreds of kids running and winning national championships cross country. The system was there. You know, you used what was there, you know, and it helped. It was fantastic to bring, if there's track and field, a new track opened up in Strabane, and to bring 40 kids up to there and get them on the road for a week and stay in different colleges. And it cost them £6 at the time to be away on a CIE bus, things like that. That was huge. There's nothing like that now. Bring a crowd to Scotland. When I was in Glenbowen, I brought a crowd to Germany. And that was the way of exposing them to a different culture. And that's why in America, they were exposed to a different culture. But the problem is now is that most of the people that potential are gobbled up by other sports. And they're, you know, but the bottom line is they must have an athletic background as well to succeed. One particular individual in the school here, he was won a few national titles in long jump, but he never did a day's training since he left primary school. He went to school in Middleton. They headhunted him for hurling, and he's on the Cork minor panel, Polish. And I made a prediction when he was 12 that he'd be the first Polish guy ever on a Cork hurling team, because he was a fantastic athlete. You know, so that's what you have to fight against. That's the number one, I think, is the professionalism in rugby. He's a good rugby player as well, and a school in Cork, I know the Christians or Pres were looking to give him a scholarship to play rugby for them, you know. So I don't see anybody headhunting athletes like that to bring them to a higher level. I think that's number one where the problem lies. A lot of them never reach the stage where they can transgress or transfer from or progress from junior to senior, because a lot of them are gobbled up before they ever reach the junior standard.
Interesting. Well, yeah, my old man was a very passionate fan of
I know that.
athletics.
It was great.
So, I mean, I guess again, it goes back to environment. If your family are keen hurlers, you're going to end up in hurling. If they're keen athletes, you're going to end up in athletics.
Yeah, well, it's like the brothers in Norway, whatever their names are. You know, Ingebrigtsens, like, yeah, their father like brings them along, and sometimes people think it's for his own ego, but you know, that might be part of it. And so what?
There's nothing wrong with a bit of ego, Liam.
Yeah, well, he's getting the results. So what? That's somebody said to, when they said that to me, I said, so what? Look what they're producing. We never saw the likes of them in a long, long time.
I mean, Roy Keane had a bit of ego, but you know, we're going to forgive him if he's one of the greatest, you know, defenders or players on the field at his prime. But there'll always be begrudgers. I mean, there's a big need to filter the information we see today and try and keep as positive as possible, particularly with COVID, obviously.
Yeah, but, and to finish off the point about progressing from junior to senior, you see, target the top juniors and then give them all the support, not when they win something, but at that level, then give them the finance, give them the coaches. And one thing that was always a bugbear of mine was that money was being doled out maybe to certain athletes. I'm not saying who or what, they mightn't have got enough. And then some were so good that they got so much or too much. I always believed that the money should have gone to the coach, and then he decide and be answerable to the athletic body for what they produce, not the athlete getting the money and be answerable to nobody. I don't know. That was always my theory anyway. I was national coach for steeplechase, and I never got a cent. I never looked for it. But then now it would be a different situation, because there is money available, but you often feel it's given at the wrong time when people don't need it. You know, what's the point of giving money, say, to Sonia O'Sullivan when she's a world champion? You know, the money should be given to her when she was 17, or to the people helping her to make the transition to a higher level.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm inclined to agree with you about the coaching thing. And again, you could spend an hour or 2 hours, bloody weekend, just chatting about the need for a professional coaching infrastructure. Absolutely critical. You know, I don't want to bang on about John McDonnell again, but he was a professional coach. You know, Alex Stewart we had on here on the High Jump Hub. He's a professional coach. I mean, he makes a full-time income out of coaching, you know, pretty good income as well, I think. And he travels the world with these guys.
And we can develop all these things. I find this very interesting now that we've had kind of a good kind of a heart-to-heart talk about this, and you've asked very searching questions. And I think we should do more of these and develop, you know, other aspects, even, you know, of where we can progress and where you can progress with what you're doing with your high jump interest. My main interest down through the years was middle distance, but I would have been very, very keen interest in every track and field event. But middle distance was my, I suppose, baby to a sense. But again, I would have total and utter empathy with all the other events as well.
Excellent, excellent. And what I would say again, Liam, is that I go back to the jigsaw thing. You played your part 100%. I mean, 10 out of 10.
I don't know. That's only your opinion. Other people would differ.
Don't mind the naysayers here, right? But we're not going to focus on the begrudgers, right? There's plenty of armchair bandits who have got all sorts of opinions about how things should be run. You know, Roosevelt had a great quote about the critic. You can Google it. You know, it's not the critic who counts. Do you know that famous quotation? It's brilliant, right? I'll send it to you, right? I had it printed out and I had it on the wall of my living room for a long time. It's not the critic who counts. It's a really long kind of piece of writing, and it basically discredits the critic. The critic has no right, unless they're in the eye of the battle and they're trading blows with the opposition, and they're suffering and making the sacrifices. You have absolutely no right to sit back and to judge people who are trying their best and who are out
and
there.
You need a thick skin.
You do need a thick skin, all right, but look, that dealing with negativity, I mean, it's not something I really want to focus on right now, but
yeah,
it is.
I had a very good talk on the radio last Sunday, and I drove out the gates of the cathedral here by Brendan O'Connor interviewing an American psychologist, and it was absolutely fascinating. You could get it on playback on RTE at 12 o'clock. Brendan O'Connor, he writes in the front page of the Sunday Independent, and it was the most, I've played it for many people since. It was so fascinating. And he said, being positive and having a very positive attitude can add a minimum of 8 years onto your life. But that was not all. It was absolutely fascinating. And I'm missing that now because I've listened to it 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure the guy's name, but it's RTE Sunday, Brendan O'Connor, and you can get it on playback.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm going to quote this for you now, Liam, just because I've introduced
All right,
it.
I'm listening.
30 seconds. It's Theodore Roosevelt, and it's often quoted, but I think it's fantastic. And again, this is one to print, to put it in a frame and hang it on your wall if you're surrounded by people who are inclined to pessimism. It's called The Man in the Arena. Obviously, that could be woman, just for the
all right. You have to be careful of the gender balance.
It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt. It's a really, really
send that to me. And Henry Ford said, "You're always right. If you think you're right, you're right. If you think you're wrong, you're wrong." And absolutely. I have a quotation. It's up in my office upstairs. And life's battles do not always go to the strongest or fittest person, but sooner or later, the person who wins is the person who believes they can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I learned something very valuable from an old compadre of mine way back in the day, Adrian O'Dwyer, the national record holder for the men's high jump. You remember Adrian O'Dwyer?
Yes.
Perseverance. In a word, Deirdre Ryan, Adrian O'Dwyer, perseverance. Robert Heffernan, perseverance. I mean, exactly what you said. Adrian O'Dwyer, when he was 15, 16, my father actually coached him. And I thought he's a good kid. He's full of enthusiasm, but uncoordinated. He was a bit like Usain Bolt when he was very young. He was a long and gangly guy, really couldn't control his joints very well or his limbs. And I kind of wrote him off. I didn't believe he would come to anything. And then after my old man passed away, I remember saying to him, Adrian, if you want to do this, there's a couple of things you need to do. One of which was to get in touch with guys who can make you very, very strong, elastically strong, and who know plyometrics, etc., etc. And within about 18 months, Liam, he became a 230 jumper. It was extraordinary, but it was perseverance. I mean, that Liam, Adrian Dwyer didn't make waves as a juvenile or a junior. He wasn't a guy who was receiving awards for community games, but he was the guy when you put him under pressure and he decided he wanted to achieve something. He had a very clear goal. He achieved it, and there was no messing around. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't dividing his time. He wasn't spreading himself thinly. And by the way, on that point about spreading yourself thinly, when I look at someone like yourself and your legacy, as an editor, a publisher, as a photographer, a coach, a mentor, You were wearing so many hats.
Administrator, national, yeah.
You were wearing 100 different hats. And you mentioned to me earlier, you said part of the reason you did that and you became the guy you did, you know, apart from your day job, by the way, with full respect to the church.
Yeah, I'm more time now, I'm retired. Although I don't know, am I retired? Because I did my stream mass this morning at 9. I have a wedding at 1:30, and I'm doing mass for a lady who died a month ago up in the Benedictine Mount at 3:45, and then I'm going to Porta Golf Club for dinner. So, you know, I'm still that. But I'll tell you one thing, and this is to me vital in a sense. Why did I suppose, spend maybe 20 years virtually out of athletics? Because I came to the decision when I saw the performances of these Germans and Russians and, you know, the drug culture. I said, why did I spend so much time focused on the Olympics, being to 8 Olympics, trying to get an athlete there? And if this is what's happening, you will never beat that system. And that's why I kind of took a back seat, took on ladies football, won 20 national championships, didn't return until I lost a match. So that was the reason. I've never said this in public before, but that was the reason. And, you know, the burning question now is when you see that one, is it from Jamaica running 10:65 for 100 meters? I'm not sure the exact amount, but it's like that, the nearest to Flojo.
Yeah, Kelly
and being so and watching Flojo run faster than that. And what happened? You know, I'm wondering now how much are all these performances, is there still the same drug culture in the sport as was in Russia and Eastern Bloc countries at the time?
And that's a long discussion. And we might have it again. We'll add it to our menu or our list of things to cover. But I mean, drugs in sport, cheating in general, people will always cheat. And you don't want to be a victim of it. Sonia was clearly a victim of it in '93 in Stuttgart, and probably
I know, I was the manager.
I remember well, yeah. I do recall, you know, the impromptu sermons we had on a Sunday when you'd host a mass in a living room, and it was well turned out. All the guys, the TJ Kearns of the world, and Sean Cahill, would hope God would.
They were great times.
They were very good times. Yeah, it was a great championship. The Germans, you know, legendary hosts of championships. I mean, the Germans, you know, just like they're producing cars, and the Japanese. You know, I'm looking forward to. I mean, Tokyo will be interesting, but brilliant at organizing big events. You know, and there were really good days. But you have a good point there. You know, you can become a bit disillusioned by, you know, the threat of cheats and undermining the credibility of sport. It's very, very sad. But again, you got to focus on the glass.
You have to move on. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to move on and focus on the glass being half full. And there's obviously many, many wonderful benefits of the sport for young people and seniors alike that go beyond participation in a championship or Olympics. You know, you talked about all those guys you helped compete in scholarships and qualify for scholarships and championships, and you know, it was character building. I mean, they did have big adventures, and it developed them as people, didn't it?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Sorry. Okay. Talk away.
You know, if you
no. The last point, because time is moving on.
Yeah. You stop me now when you have to go away, because I know you want to be late for that wedding. You know.
No. I want to go for a walk before the wedding first. What you were going to ask one more question.
I was going to ask you about your legacy. You know, in a nutshell, your legacy to the sport. What do you think it was?
I don't know. I never even thought about that.
50 years time.
It's just to me, it was a labor of love. It kept me occupied at a time when I needed something to occupy my mind, and now I'm back at it again, because it's something to occupy my mind now when I have the time to do it when I'm retired. So I don't know, I would look back and say I've great friends with all the people in athletics. I don't think I made too many enemies. I did a few, but if I did, well, then that's part and parcel of every life. But the vast majority would be very, very positive memories, and we hope those memories will continue.
Absolutely, I wouldn't doubt it for a second. Thousands and thousands of young people benefited from your contribution. So again, well done for that. It was a priceless contribution. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Liam? Or
No, I think we've enough, because people
Yeah.
will be, you know, there's only a certain amount we can take in, and there's only a certain
Exactly.
amount we can talk about, and
I agree.
you don't want to exhaust everything. I think
Mhm.
I've been very uplifted by this, and I've
Yeah.
often thought about doing something like that myself, starting my own blog, but this could be the Kelleher Burke blog.
Oh, we could talk about a lot of stuff, that's for sure. I'd have to boil the kettle and go for round two on the tea, or crack a bottle of wine or something, depending on the time of day. It's nighttime here, of course, and it's morning for you, so we'd be drinking different drinks, and it could get it could get very messy. But I'll let you get on to
I
your
only drink water, so I'm okay.
I'll let you get on to your wedding. You don't want to be late for that. And thank you very much. I'm gonna sign out of the recording now, and I'll talk to you again after I stop the recording part.
Yeah, thanks. It's been enlightening, and hopefully some person will benefit from it if they have time to listen.
Absolutely.